Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you might be. We're back with another identity show that's not entirely about identity. Although today's going to be a lot more about identity, I think, because today we're gonna take a break from the Thrasman and we're gonna work a little bit on some new stuff that Christos has been cooking up. Plus, we got some new features. Plus, we got some new features coming into B2C that we wanna highlight and showcase. Good morning, Bolt. Good to see you again, or good afternoon. And yeah, oh no, we're not starting too early, are we? No, this is the right time.
This is the right time.
We keep on changing our schedule, so I couldn't remember what time we were supposed to be here. But yeah, today's gonna be a B2C day. It's gonna be a JavaScript day, and we're gonna write some functions. We're gonna build some code, and yeah, it's gonna be an interesting day. What you got going on this morning, Christos? How are you?
Well, let's start with why do you take such a big breath? You're like, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the show, everyone. I mean, this is not the way to start your Monday, man. Come on.
I'm going to be thoroughly distracted this week. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there because I've gotten into car buying mode again.
When are you going to learn?
I just bought a car back in the summertime, but it's a 6-speed. My wife didn't know how to drive it, and her car was down for 5 days last week while we waited on tires to come in. Apparently, tire manufacturing has also been hit by coronavirus stuff, and so it took 5 days for us to get a new tire because the ones we had on there we had just bought over the summer, so we wanted to, we didn't want to have a different one.
Yeah.
So we had to wait for it to get ordered, and she didn't have a car for 5 days, and she had told the kids that she was taking them somewhere, so we had to go rent a car, and it was just a total pain, and because she couldn't drive mine, and we've been together for 13 years, and she's never been able to drive a stick, so I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon. So I talked to my brother, who is sort of the ultimate in frugality. I've never met anybody who's more frugal to, like... he's amazing, and I don't know how he does it, but I called him, and he's like, well, if you want to drive a stick, just go buy a $500 beater and just drive that, and buy a car that you can fit your kids in, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong, right?
Yeah, so my question, though, and we can ask this later, but I'm kind of curious if anybody's ever used Carvana in the States, because I haven't bought a used car in a long time, and I'm a little anxious, I'm not going to lie. And I'm pretty sold on the Volvo V90 station wagon. It's a station wagon. It's huge. Can easily fit. I mean, I'm coming from essentially a Volkswagen Jetta, so if I can fit 3 kids across in a Volkswagen Jetta, I can fit 3 kids across in a Volvo, no sweat. My problem now, though, is that nobody in the United States buys station wagons. Everybody buys SUVs. I don't want an SUV. I don't like them. I think they're ugly. I think they're slow. They're less convenient minivans. I don't like them, right? Because the doors swing open. I just don't like them. Nobody's probably ever going to change my mind. The only one that was worth buying was the old V12 diesel Audi Q7. Because it was a V12. There's no other reason. It was still ugly, right?
Have you seen mine?
Yeah. What is it, an Explorer?
Yeah, the latest one.
My sister
400 brake horsepower. Dude, that's not slow. That's 5 seconds to 60.
Yeah, but it's an 8,000-pound car.
You don't feel it. I don't care. I mean, I get your point. There are also BMW and Mercedes that do some really nice station wagons. So I had a Mercedes station wagon back in the UK. Highly recommend it. It's not too big, and it's still a decent still decent space, but it's not a massive, super long car. So have a look at those as well. But they're slightly more expensive. Well, you can get an E-Class or a C-Class. I mean, an E-Class probably would be better for this amount of money.
I was looking at the Volvos because used ones are relatively inexpensive. And seeing as I just bought one over the summer, I kind of don't want to go nuts and spend too much. But True. I've always wanted an E63 wagon. A Mercedes E63 wagon.
Yes.
And of course, they're $125,000 new. So
Defies it you, right?
But Audi is bringing the RS6 wagon to the States in 2021. But the problem is, of course, it's $110,000. But I do think it'd be kind of fun to, you drop the kids off sideways in a cloud of tire smoke. You drop them off in the school line. I mean, it'd just be so much fun. But
I agree with Bolt, by the way. Pickup. Just throw the kids in the trunk and just drive.
They're too little. They'll climb out. Especially the 2-year-old. He'd probably absolutely love it and be the first one to see, to test his flying ability. So,
horror stories. When I used to visit my grandpa, he did have a pickup truck. And obviously, it was a 2-seater, not the massive ones they have in the US. So he would throw us and our cousins in the trunk and then just drive us to wherever he'd drive. That's, obviously in some remote area, but thinking about the health and safety things and, oh God, so many things could have gone wrong, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so I don't know. And Bolt says get a Saab wagon. And I had 2 Saabs. I had 2. I loved my old Saabs. I had a 9.5 and a 9.3, and I loved both of them. But the 9.5 had a cracked block, so that one didn't last very long. The 9.3 was good, but it was also a stick, so my wife couldn't drive it. And I don't know. I'm torn now because my local dealer has a wagon. They have a V90, but it's a T5 front wheel drive. And it's white, and white cars, get dirty really quickly. And but I found one, but it only has 11,000 miles, and it's certified. But I found one used somewhere else. It's a 2019, but it's a T6 all-wheel drive, which of course is desirable, and it's blue, which makes it way, way better looking than the white one. Problem with that one is it's got 30,000 miles on it. It's only a year old, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. And then the whole Carvana thing, it's like you're going to buy a car sight unseen. They say you can take it back, like you can call and somebody will come get it within a week. I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, I'm going to perseverate on that all week until I make a decision. And that decision will probably be, well, maybe I just shouldn't do this. And I know that's what it'll be right now, but I can't. I'll have to go through the process. So it's going to be a week of mourning because I'm not going to know what to do and I'm going to think about it way too much. So I'll be distracted. I'm just going to throw it out there. But anyway, so you were busy last week, huh?
I was. Well, you know what? I got my head into, I need to learn some Vue.js. I need to learn me some Vue.js. I need to get back into the JavaScript bandwagon. In retrospect, I don't know if that was a good decision or not, considering the amount of time I spent and also the amount of fiddling around trying to figure out how things work. So for those of us that are joining this morning, this is not a car show. Although we love talking about cars and gadgets and what have you. And we will be talking about MSAL and JavaScript. But coming from a .NET background, I started to feel the pain of learning something totally new with lack of documentation. Or maybe I wasn't able to find the right documentation. So I was fiddling around. But anyway, I managed to get things to work. So last week, I learned Vue from scratch, to the point I was able to create a few components, and I was able to add a login functionality that logs in against Azure AD. And then I was in the process of adding some Azure SDK love to go and pull some storage resources using the Azure SDK. Morning, Silicon Orchard. Thanks for joining us. But it was an experience, definitely. It was fun to learn new stuff. I missed learning things from scratch, to be honest. So that was definitely interesting. And today I was thinking maybe we can show people what I build or how I build it. And I think we can have 2 different things because there was a major announcement that came out last week. So for those of you that are in the JavaScript node space, you know that we released MSAL.js 2.0 back in May. Was it May? It was May, right?
I think
May.
So.
Or early June. We released 2.0, which means that you don't have to use implicit flow anymore, which is fantastic. However, it did not work perfectly out of the box with B2C. So as I was saying to JP, and we're planning on Friday, hey, let's do the stream on Vue.js on Monday. It's like, hey, let's not do Azure AD. Let's do Azure AD B2C first. See how this works. Or I mean, we can go whichever turn you want, and then we can decide how we take it. So we can have 2 flavors. One is Azure AD, again, and then we can use that information to go and pull some Azure's data using the Azure SDKs. And then we can do Azure AD B2C, which is more of a do an integration with React. Yeah, we'll do one with React. Absolutely, we have React. In fact, we did a React one a few months ago, a couple of months ago. But that was us building we did a React with a custom, or did we do? Oh no, we did a React with Azure SDKs, but we did not use the MSAL.js. And that's something that we also need to highlight here. That right now, if you need to use the Azure SDKs, there is a dedicated library called Azure Identity that manages the authentication and tokens for the request. So that means that if you already authenticate for your application using MSAL.js, and then you want to pull some Azure data out, then it becomes a little bit of a tricky situation because now you have to re-authenticate using the Azure Identity because it's not aware. So for us to work around that one, we have a custom token provider. Right now, this is an external piece of code or third-party code that you have to use, or it's a very small piece of code that, in effect, rather than forcing the Azure SDK to use Azure Identity for authentication, we can actually pass the token. So we already have a token as part of the authentication. Let's pass that in. Now, I spoke to the Azure SDKs team last week, and they did say that they're making a big effort to add that as a baked-in functionality. So assuming that you come from an authenticated backend, why not use your already authenticated credentials and pass that information into the Azure SDKs rather than re-authenticating? So for this show, we'll have quite a few things, but we'll definitely do React as well with like vanilla, starting with React and how you can add Azure AD and B2C and see how this works. And yeah, we can add a custom backend. I mean, we can have an API somewhere that we call maybe an Azure function somewhere and make it all work and be happy.
Yeah, I've got some React stuff too that we had done for customers before. I'll put it out in the I'll put it in the chat, but like an Axios interceptor that uses redirect, that sort of thing. So that, I mean, because essentially the biggest thing about React we found was with MSAL, you really need to wrap so that you don't have multiple instances. Multiple instances of MSAL tend to cause a little bit of drama, and the library itself doesn't really seem to account for it. So all the things that I've had to build with React, it has definitely been easier to wrap it in your own sort of singleton factory, so that you just get the same MSAL over and over and over again, and have one place for creating them. So yeah, we'll do a React one. We'll put it on our list. We'll do one in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we want to do a lot more JavaScript stuff, although both me and JP are, or at least I speak for myself when I say that I'm a .NET child, so I feel a lot more confident and comfortable in that space. So should we start with Vue.js? Should we do the B2C first, and then we maybe tackle together the Azure SDK stuff? Because I got to the point that we could almost call the Azure SDK's component to get the storage data out, but I cannot pass the token. So maybe we do the simple one first with B2C.
Well, I think with B2C, we're gonna have to change your code anyway. So
just a little bit.
Let's fix your stuff first.
So should we start from scratch, or should we go back and fix what we have?
Well, show us what you've got and what isn't working. Let's figure out why the Azure SDK isn't working. Because of course the other option is just do it yourself and skip the SDK.
You could, yeah. In effect, you could pass the token. But I know how you feel about the SDKs, right?
Well, I like them when they work, and when they're not too big and bloated. But no, I think for someone like me, I've never used Vue. So I've used React and I've used Angular, but I've never used Vue.
Okay.
So I'm kind of curious, sort of what all goes into getting it ready.
Okay, so maybe we do that. So this is a vanilla one that you get when you run the Vue create blah, right? So if you say Vue create hello world, then if you run it, it asks whether you want to use Vue 2 or Vue 3. Vue 3 is the latest one, and I said, why not? Hell, I'll go with the latest, right? What's the worst that can happen? So if you run it, you end up with this kind of vanilla code. You have your packages, which are down here. Obviously, Vue is the main component one. You have some dev dependencies as well. It relies on Babel to compile and run. And then you have your main.js, which is your entry point. This is where is this complaining? What does it want? Oh, there you go. So this one is what, in effect, is your main entry point, like the main function inside a CS class. So in here you create your app. You call the app view, which is this one. In effect, you say, I want to start with this page. And I think this is also how you do, say, if you were doing Xamarin, you will say, bootstrap the cell, and then from there, let's go and mount the first one, which is the create app. And inside your app, you have your cell. Think of that as your starting point for displaying views and what have you. And if we ignore the style, so let's hide the style now. There's no. So up here you have your template, which is where the point where your HTML code goes. Simple as that. And then you import the dependent components here. So as you see here, the hello world is a component. We'll jump into that in a bit. But for the app to run, you have your export default. You give it a name, and then you say what components you want to use down here. So fairly simple here. Now, if you wanted to add data or functions or something else, then this is where you would put them in here as well.
Okay.
And inside your components, you have all the individual components. Think of them as your views, more or less. So, how in .NET, ASP.NET, you have your Razor views that you import, and you have main and child, and you can embed views within the views. And in a similar manner, here you have Hello View, which is the default one. It has all the links. So if we were to run this one, terminal. Here, you can say npm. I think I need to do a restore. I don't think I've done a restore here.
I think isn't it an install? In npm. It's
what did I say?
It's restore in .NET.
I need more coffee. Come on.
Well, we moved the show later, so it wouldn't be so early for you.
I know, but I'm still drinking my huge pot of coffee, and I've just started. So it's installing everything for us, and then it's npm run serve. Now it works better with Chrome. Apparently, Vue has a nice dependency on Chrome, and it allows you to debug, run, and you get auto reload. It does everything for you, so it's quite nice to work in that space. So it has a watcher in the background and does everything for you. So there you go. That should be all running now. So if we launch it, there you go. That's our application running.
Okay.
Perfect as that. So that's all you need to get it off the ground, right? I was like, okay, that's a good starting point. And for me, it was like, good. I see what's happening here. And then I went into, I was like, how do I learn Vue last week? So I went into Pluralsight, my go-to place for learning new things. Obviously, the Vue.js documentation is okay-ish, to say. Vue.js. Getting started, I don't know. Or maybe docs, Vue.js 3.0. There you go, you come to the Vue website and then get started. What is Vue? So it goes through all these things. Unfortunately, I think it jumps very quickly into like making assumptions, and also lacks that kind of a full end-to-end how things are put together. So I struggle a little bit in like, okay, so this is how things are working. So I went back to Pluralsight and I followed, what's his name? John Papa's workshop. Now, unfortunately, his stuff were against 2.0. So I had to translate everything I was finding inside the tutorial to 3.0, and then I had to Google and search for that. But I got to the point that things are working. So let's open my code, and then we'll walk through what I've done and see why it's not working. And then maybe we can do from scratch a B2C one. So if I come back here, actually, we can open the file from here. New folder. Open the folder. And if I go into projects, view with Azure AD, and we'll select this folder. Quite a few bits here. Okay, let's see what's changed. Obviously, if we go to package.json, let me close this one. We have quite a few more dependencies. Obviously, I don't think I need that one anymore, so we can remove it. We have MSAL browser, which is the one that we need to use to authenticate against Azure AD. Found awesome to make it nice. I followed, because I was following his tutorial, I followed his dependencies as well. So Bulma is something very similar to Bootstrap. It seems to be a lot more lightweight and a lot less dependencies. So I installed Bulma and started playing with it. I had to say that as I was looking at the documentation, I also found some gaps there, because I think on the Bootstrap website, you get a lot of nice examples of how things are put together. The Bulma website was a little bit less intuitive to me. Or at least didn't provide as many examples as I wanted to have. Then we have core.js tiny emitter. Apparently, if you want to send messages from one component to another and you want to go over your parent, so you have parent-child relationships. Now, if a component is included in the parent, then you can easily emit events back to the parent, which is great. But how do you emit the events to your grandparent or dependencies that are outside your component hierarchy? Well, for that to work, you need to use something like a bus or a messenger. And in Vue 3, they removed that. So as I was looking at the documentation for Vue 2.0, there was a built-in emitter. That was brilliant. So you can emit an event and then you can listen to events and respond to them. With 3.0, they said, well, you know what? You bring your own emitter. It's like, okay. So I had to go and grab a different emitter, then Vue, the Vue version, and then Vuex, which manages state. Because I want to do things like I wanted to have a singleton, or I wanted to have something that passes data back and forth. And the easiest way to do that was to actually add a state. I tried to avoid that. And there's a way to register components at the top level, so you can have global variables. But oh god, I mean, obviously you don't want to have global variables in your application. And then secondly, like I was registering the MSAL instance, and I wanted to use the MSAL instance in other parts of the solution, and then that was registered as an object, so I couldn't deserialize. Obviously, if I had more time, I could look into how do I deserialize my components, if that's even a thing in JavaScript. So I ended up just, that's an object. I can't use the object, so I couldn't call MSAL go and get token async or whatever, or silent. I was like, you know what, I'll reinstantiate the MSAL instance. And my code could probably be awful. Like I don't expect this to be anything that I'm proud of using, but let's ignore that. Right, on the main, what do we have on the main? So this is the entry point for the application. We have the create app, which is the one that we use to bootstrap the app. We have the app. We register the emitter over here, so we need to import that. And I've created a store, which is used to manage the state. And the store is part of the Vuex components. We instantiate an emitter here. Then we create our app. As you can see here, I was dumping everything into my global variables. And again, the documentation for global variables was quite a bit thin, because they had a different way to register. I think it's a view.prototype, and then you pass in your global variables into that, which worked for 2.0. Once I upgraded to 3.0, things stopped working. So app config global properties, and then you add them there. I think global properties is a giant JSON object array that you pass things there and you pull them out. But now we're using a store. So I have my store here, and then we app them out. And then, okay, so that happens there. Now, if we go into our app view, I have a couple more components. The header bar, I copied the header bar from John Papa's workshop. So I have a nice header bar that says what the app name is, and includes some links, including the login link. So we'll see that as we run the app. And then in here we have a hello world, which is our main component. Let's think of that as our main component that we're gonna put the data in the site. Then I have to re-import the store. So here we have nothing else in here. And then most of the stuff is happening inside the components. So I'm going to go into the header bar. It doesn't have any code here. It just imports the subcomponents. And there are two subcomponents. One is the branding, which sits on the left-hand side. Nothing exciting here, just my Azure AD logo. Obviously, had to be an Azure AD look and feel kind of an app. And then the name of the app. And then on the other side, this is where the magic happens. On this side, we have the template, which includes the login, logout, and some other links like GitHub and Twitter, so we can link into those. And it's nice. I like Vue. Vue has a very nice built-in kind of extensions to HTML. So if you notice here the VIF, it checks for the state of a component or state of a variable or something in the data and says, well, you know what, if this thing is set, if it exists, then display something. Otherwise, do not even try to compute the state of that. So, you know, if you had something that relies on the existence of the account, in this case, someone has logged in. So let's show the logout component. We can also have things like, hey, if something is set, like if the user is logged in, go and calculate something and build more data at the back of that. So, you know, they have VIF and VELSE, they have VShow, they have a huge number of Vue components there that you can use inside your templates to change the logic and the look and feel of the application. But let's jump into the code. So here I'm importing MSAL, right? So I can use it. I have a data component. This is what we can bind into in the app. So, you know, the account and GitHub, you can reference them directly inside your views. So this is my binding here, colon href binds to the Twitter variable. And then, so I'm setting them here. You can see we're starting with undefined because the user has not been signed in yet. Then we have Vue provides a lifecycle of components. So you can have created, I can't remember all the different ones. So let's have a look. Vue lifecycle. Lifecycle hooks. Is that the one? Let's see. Instance. Oh, there you go. So these are all the ones. Before create, created. Let me make this bigger. So for every component, you have all these different events that you can hook into. Before created, created, before mount, mounted. And then at these different points in the application, you can actually do different things in the functionality. So in this instance, on the created one, I'm instantiating an MSAL instance. Okay, and then on the mounted, I check for an existence of an account. So if I already have an account, I'm trying to go and get them from the local storage. And if I find an account, if I don't find an account, I'm just returning, so nothing to display there. But if I do find an account, I select it, I set it to my account, so I'm setting this variable over here in the data. And then I'm emitting an event that says, hey, this user is actually logged in. Whoop, whoop. Now, why is this important? Because as soon as I set this one, the reactivity of Vue will go and say, hey, by the way, let's evaluate the VIF here. So if I'm already, if I have an account, check that out. It says, well, you know what? We can show the logout or the sign out. So, you know, now that the account is set, let's go and set it to disable and also display the name here. So at this point, let's run and see how this works. Any questions so far? I know you're busy over there, JP, just answering to things. No, B2C conversations. Okay, so let's do npm run serve. This one is starting the development server. Oh, wow. This extension is not particularly nice because down here things are happening and you can't see them because they're so faint. They're so faint even for me to see. So I need to choose a different theme. Last week, everyone was asking JP, what theme are you using? It's like, you know what, I want to play the theme game, so I went and downloaded a theme, but it's not as nice. Oh, check this out. I am already logged in because I have my state. So if I F12 in here, a few errors down here, let's ignore them for now. But if I go into my application and look into my local storage, I already have. Can I zoom in on this one? Oh, nice. So in here, you notice that MSAL has already done the authentication as I was playing before, and now it picked that information. So you know what? The user is already logged in, man. Just display the data. So here we have the authentication happening. But let's prove to everyone that this is a working application.
Hey,
so I'm going to sign out.
You got a couple questions. Did you use or try or look at the Vue MSAL library?
I did.
Or a wrapper that somebody made?
That is a third-party component. Yes. My first approach was to use that. But I was like, you know what? Also, it hasn't been updated in 3 months. So I thought it might be missing some of the latest information. Okay. Oh, yeah, it was also using implicit flow. So it was not using 2.0. And I think we discussed about this, the two of us, right? Because we said, hey, in fact, I pinged you. I said, hey, this guy wrote this MSAL wrapper library. Maybe we can help him move it to 2.0. And that's an interesting library. Let's jump into that, by the way, because that's a nice question. So if we go,
and one other question: what are you storing in local storage?
I'm not storing everything. It's all what MSAL is doing. So if you,
it's MSAL's local storage. Okay, yeah, because. MSAL will store, and MSAL has two store locations. You can use local storage or you can use session storage. Local storage makes it easier for sort of cross-tab because other apps at the same domain can access that same storage. And so an MSAL instance's cache can be reused by different MSAL instances across different apps. Session storage is limited to just a session. So if you control all the apps on a domain, that's using local storage. If you don't want somebody to have to relog in on every tab, that is good. But if you don't control all of them, or if you want people to sign in separately into each app individually, then you'll want to use session storage.
Exactly. And I jumped ahead a little bit here because as part of the MSAL configuration, this is following the docs. You can. This is what is required to use it to work against Azure AD. And here I'm passing the client ID, my authority, and then I configure the cache to be local cache. Initially, I had not set up the cache, and it was session only. So as I was opening new tabs, I had to re-authenticate. That pissed me off a little bit. So I was like, you know what? Local storage it is. So if we go back to MSAL.js, I think was the question, right? So let's see what is MSAL.js. Where do we have it? MSAL browser? No, that's not the one.
Yeah, that is MSAL browser. That's.
Oh no, that's the official one, right? But there's an MSAL.js extension. So Vue MSAL maybe if I search for that.
Vue-MSAL Vue-MSAL.
That's the one. So last update was June 1st. So they may be missing some information here. And then I went into, but it worked beautifully out of the box using this one. Obviously, the big difference here is that you have to use implicit flow. And I was like, you know what, I don't want to use implicit flow, but fairly easy to set up and work with. Just add the information you need and it works for you. So that's another option.
Looks like they're working on a, the owner of this is, is working on it. So other people in the Vue MSAL repo, other people are sort of testing it and checking it out. So it looks like MSAL 1 to MSAL 2 is very close to drop in, depending on what you're doing, of course. But in most cases, you can drop in and make the change and don't have to make any code changes. And the hope would be, depending on what Vue MSAL is doing, the hope would be that we drop it in and we roll. But yeah, I don't know.
First issue here. Somebody was like, hey, where's Vue MSAL? So there's a Vue MSAL 2.2, which apparently uses MSAL 2.0, I suppose. Doesn't say anything in the docs, but probably that's a fork or an extension here. Someone's asking, I'm trying to learn back-end web development. Which framework should I start with? Well, that's a bit of a loaded question, I suppose, but it all depends on what you currently know, right? So if you are a JavaScript developer that is doing a lot of stuff with front-end, single-page apps, then I think Node.js would be the most appropriate answer here, because the transition should be fairly easy, and then you become a full-stack developer. It's funny how the JavaScript community has taken the full-stack developer ownership kind of thing. I mean, you can do full-stack with .NET, right? Side note. But anyway, Node.js for the backend, so you can create your APIs and what have you, and then you can have a single-page app in the front end. If you're a JavaScript developer, that should be awesome. Now, if you are a .NET developer, plenty of options there. If you're using, say, .NET, then you can have both backend and front end. And with Blazor these days, it's fairly straightforward to create either server-side components or client-side components. So that's another option. And I'm pretty sure that if you want to veer out of these ones, then you can have a Java backend with a single-page app in the front end. All comes down to what you're comfortable with. I'm a .NET child.
If I was starting today, I'd probably do Node and Express, just because it probably has the largest ecosystem of samples and tutorials and plugins and people actively using it. And there's just there's the size of it is just amazing. There are tons of tutorials. There are tons of Pluralsight courses. And so, yeah, like Node as a backend and using like the Express web server, for example, that might be one place to start. The Express server in Node. But there are all sorts of different ways to start. I mean, .NET's got Web API, and which we of course use that. We use that pretty heavily. And yeah, there are plenty of frameworks in Java and everywhere else. But if I was going to start today and I had no sort of programming background or a limited programming background, I'd probably start in JavaScript and Node.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Someone's saying my next greenfield project will be Blazor WASM. Bring it on. Right. Back to the code. So we have the mounted, so it checks for an account. And as you saw, when we spun up the app, what is the theme? I'm using bearded. I had to go with a theme that matches my looks. And you can go and download it. There you go, bearded. Bearded theme. It's pretty cool, actually. It has quite a few options there. It comes with like 19 presets or whatever. So give it a go. So anyway, back to our codes. Thanks for asking the theme. Let's see, where are we? So here we have mounted. The app starts, it loads the component, it looks for an account. If the account is found, it displays that. And then obviously if you log in or log out, if you need to log in and log out, I have events. So how are these events kicked off? You notice that we are binding with an @click. It says if somebody clicks at that A tag, then and we're displaying it, then respond with a sign out method. So at click, we call the sign out, and down here, if we have at click, sign in. So the user is not signed in, and then there you go, boom, happens. So the methods here are pretty straightforward, saying that. I had to use an async sign in. So here we're awaiting for the login pop-up. You can do login redirect and login pop-up. I chose for the login pop-up, so it has a nice experience. And then once the login executes, the result comes back, and we grab the accounts. We select the first account from there, and we emit an event that I'll show you how we respond to that event in a bit. And if there is an error, we display the error down here. For the sign out, very similar. We call the MSAL instance logout. So this is the one that popped up, the pop-up message to say which account do you want to log out from. I did that. I also emit an event called logout. And at this point, MSAL will take care of the cache as well. So we'll remove everything. And you are, in effect, logged out from the application. So, so this is the code that is currently working. It's working perfectly fine. What I had issues with was, right, now that I have my account, I want to go to my Azure SDK and say, hey, you know what, go and grab me my storage data. And this is where the problem happened. Now, I was like, how do I pass back my data from MSAL? So initially I was sticking the MSAL instance into my global variables. I was like, you know what, that should pass me the MSAL instance with all the information I need, and I should be able to go and get tokens async. Nah, no such luck. So that didn't work. So what happens here? Let's look at the code. So in the hello world, which is the main component, if I go back to my app, you will notice that I have, where's my local app? There you go. Huh, interesting. It says you need to authenticate. You know what? Because I'm probably not authenticated. I'm not. Okay. So you know, see, it says you need to authenticate to access your SQL data. Obviously, I was looking to do some SQL stuff there. I did not do SQL stuff. So I went and let's go and authenticate again. I don't know why in this VM it always asks me to log in with some key. JP, do you know why this behavior happens here?
It's probably a combination of conditional access and you have to redirect your smart cards to your VM.
Right. Okay. So log in with my local account. You notice MFA out of the box, right? So I didn't have to do anything, and I'm going to use my phone to respond and say yes, I am trying to log in. So two-factor authentication for the win. Obviously, this is my domain account. So there you go, authenticated. Ooh, I'm pausing here. Let's keep past that one for now. It's too big and I can't see my continue. Now check this out, down here, this is in my hello world. So I responded to my event that said, hey, you just logged in, pass the account information. So I'm logged in as Christos, and my storage data should go down here. You know, so I fixed that one, so it doesn't say SQL anymore. So let's go and have a look at the code to see what this one's doing. So remember, we have an event. On created, I'm registering for the emitter. So on login, I'm like, okay, grab the account that gets passed, and then set the local variable in the data. I have a data object somewhere here called account. So pass that in there, then write it in the console, and then try to get the storage data. So up until this point, everything is working okay. So if we go back into our console, let's make it bigger. This is the account we have here with the right information. How did I log in? My home account, my name, my tenant ID, and my username. That works fine. Now, getting the storage data, this is where things are going wrong because I am not getting the right token. And I've noticed that if I put breakpoints, it does not, in fact, call my MSAL instance acquired token silent or the MSAL instance acquired token pop-up. So this one does not take place, and I couldn't figure out why. So now you notice that if I scroll up a little bit, it does say getting storage data. So that gets called. So if in our code, we have the getting storage data here, and I'm calling the get Azure storage data, but it never goes into my acquired token silent. Initially, and that was like 10 minutes before we kicked off the show, I was like, okay, there must be something missing. And apparently the get or acquired token silent, it's an awaitable function. So it's like, okay, I need to call that. put await. So I had to turn everything async, which is fine. But that still does not execute properly. So
is it even making it past this account? If not this dot account return on 53.
53.
Here.
Yeah,
is it even making it there?
Yes, it does.
And does an account exist?
Yeah, we can check that out, right? So let's go back to the code. We can put a breakpoint here, I guess. No, it doesn't let me. Interesting, it doesn't let me point a breakpoint here. Huh.
Well, it's fine though. It can go there.
Right. So if I refresh here.
Okay. So. Okay, so you're getting so.
Yeah, but it didn't return, right?
What's in this account? Anything? Although if this is undefined.
Yeah. Requests undefined. So it creates a new MSAL instance. It's fine. And then it never calls it. Just returns.
So what's the so.
Oh.
Go back over to your code for a minute.
Yep.
So what is the purpose of let self equal this on 60?
Well, I thought that maybe because this one, I think inside arrow functions, that this is losing its scope, so it becomes local to the this or something like that. There's a weird kind of issue with Vue. I was like, you know what? I think this is where I need to maybe get myself. So get self, which is the top. This before this gets reallocated to something.
Okay. Let's see here. So, let's see. When a Vue instance is created, it adds all the properties found in its data object to Vue's reactivity system.
Mm-hmm.
The values of those properties change. The Vue will react, updating to match the new values. Okay. So, it looks like...
See? Yeah. And while you're looking for this one, people may be wondering how we got to these scopes over here. So if I go back to Azure AD, that's the B2C stuff. Let's go into Azure AD. So home, Azure Active Directory. This is what I've registered my app registration for Vue for this specific example. It's taking a while.
Yeah, I think the big thing is don't use an arrow function. Kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. Okay.
So where's the arrow function in here? Where are you creating it? So go up some.
So the first one is get Azure Storage. So that's the entry point. There's no arrow functions here, right? Oh, there's an arrow function here.
Okay. So.
But we do know that this get Azure Storage gets called. So is working here, right?
So where is account? Where is account defined?
Account is defined as part of the data object, right there.
So
and then
so put a breakpoint on 42 and see if this .account's even being set, because it may only be getting set inside of that scope.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Where is my? There. So let's put a breakpoint. Let's remove these breakpoints here. Let's put a breakpoint and you said 42, right?
Yeah, 42.
Okay. Let's refresh.
Okay, so what's this in this context?
Why the hell does it say undefined? I think that's a...
Now, what's this? Now, what is this on 40? That should be...
Huh. I think that's a debugging issue, not...
Yeah. So, I would say maybe the better place to look... Let's see.
Bolt.io is like, slap a console log just before the statements.
You know, if console.log is not a domain that's been purchased, we should definitely buy that.
So right now, as you execute it, we know that this is set, because if you look at the console, we just got that information. So 42 executed, and it executed correctly, or it executed with the expected information.
Yeah, so in V2 it says, do not use arrow functions. Let's see, don't use arrow functions on an instance property or callback. Arrow functions are bound to the parent context. This will not be the Vue instance as you'd expect, and this not my method will be undefined. In order to get the correct reference to this as the Vue instance, use a regular function. So let's look at what you've got, and let's get rid of some of these arrow functions.
Okay. Which one do you want to get rid of first?
So the first one here is in your created event. Now, according to the lifecycle, is this even available that early? Because it's I guess it's created, so I'm assuming it is. Okay.
Well, I'm assuming it is because it executes, right? So for us, it executes. So we know that this point is okay. And we get to the point of 42 where we print out this account, and that works. So at this point, we have an account here.
Well, right, but my point is that it may be an account that's within a scope that doesn't... It's been saved in a scope that doesn't exist anymore. It's been saved into this scope of the arrow function instead of this scope of the overall... yeah. Instead of the class as a whole, it's within the scope of this arrow function. So
would you do here the self equals this and then use self down here?
No,
or
I think that's
avoid the
I think at least according to the Vue docs, don't use arrow functions. So rather than trying to hack around making arrow functions work, it seems like it'd be a better idea to not use arrow functions at all. So. Now emitter that's a third-party package, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It expects the name of the event and then a function to be called.
Okay.
Tiny emitter. If you're looking for the library, it's called tiny emitter.
All right, let's go take a look.
Tiny emitter. This is the one. This is one of the two recommended ones for using with Vue.js, so we can pass messages around. Because right now we went like two levels up from the child component all the way up to the parent's parent to emit an event.
Okay, so go back to let's go back to your code for a minute.
Yep.
And essentially on like 40, for example,
let's function name.
Well, let's just create a function here instead of using the arrow.
So methods, let's add a new method. Should we call it what?
Well, I mean, about the only... Well, no. Just change the signature to be a function. And on 40, just change that signature instead of using an arrow. Just use a function. Async function, blah blah blah. Although I'm not sure how to do anonymous. I guess that should be okay. Okay. Now let's go down and do the same thing on. Well, I guess let's not worry about logout yet. So let's just do this, and then in your Get Azure Storage. Well, in your Get Azure Storage data, do we have anything in here that's using arrow functions?
We have the MSAL instance using arrow functions.
That should be okay, because as long as we're not trying to bubble any of that beyond the MSAL instance, that should be okay. So
well, we're trying to write to the access token, right? So we want to store the access token inside our data objects. I mean, we don't have to, right? I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, because normally we'd want to ask MSAL for a token when we need it, right?
Yeah.
Because there are any number of reasons that token could be invalid.
Sure.
And if we're
let's not store it, right?
So let's not store it. And then if we're using await, we don't need to use then. So instead, that just essentially becomes you set acquire token silent to a variable, and then that variable is where you can go do whatever we need to with the thing.
Yeah. Right? Let token response equals await that. And let's remove that from here. So we execute this one with a request.
Yep.
And here we say my console is that. Should we wrap it in a try catch? Because
yeah, we'll have to. Because if for whatever reason that is which if that fails because of MSAL saying, hey, this isn't going to work because you need to MFA up, or your token's expired and we need you to sign in, or something else has changed, then yeah, we'll have to go. Yeah.
You see that magic? Alt, you select the selection, and then you say Alt, and then you use the arrow keys up and down, and can move the code as you want it, so you don't have to copy paste.
Okay.
Right. So we're doing. So we don't need that one there. We can use this, right? So we can also remove line 59. So this now should refer to the current. We're not storing it anymore, right?
Yeah, just comment it out for now.
Is it going to go bonkers? No, it's not. Because, by the way, you're getting so many. Like if I don't do anything here and I remove that, it will complain about request not being used anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's always fun. Anyway, we're logging in here. Let's catch the error. So if the error is blah. So here what we're saying is if we try to acquire the token silently and there's no token, it means that something expired or something's not working. So we need to go and have an interactive experience with the user. At this point, we're doing the acquire token pop-up. So something will be presented to the user and you should get the token back. So here again, let's remove that line. Oh, so did we just, we just commented that out. Comment this one out. Now we need to fix our cats here. What is this closing? Okay, so we need one more there.
We need to, and if we're gonna await those, we should get rid of the thens.
True. Sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. So here is. So removing that one, terminating here, and here we should say console.log token response access token. So that's fine. I think we have an extra closing tag here. We don't need that. So try to acquire it silently, doesn't work. Then we catch the error. Should that not be under? Right, fine, I'll leave it there. And if the error message is interaction acquire, is there a finally here, or do we need to just, or do we do another catch? Do you know?
The finally in this case will really be that token acquisition failed entirely. So there's not really much you can do.
Right. Let's ignore it then. I'm just following the patterns that we got from there. So right now, so what do we have here? We have token response. Well, ideally, should that not be further up so we can actually use it later on? The access token? Because we need to pass it into the custom token credential.
Why don't you just return it from... Oh, you're doing everything in one thing. Yeah, I guess that's fine.
I mean, this is not the best design, right? It was me trying to get it to work before I started refactoring stuff.
Okay, then yeah, token response. We're gonna have something somewhere. Maybe just another string for.
No, that should be access token, right?
Yeah.
And then let's copy that. And then down here as well, we need to do the same. And then down here, we can do the access token. Now let's have a quick look into the custom token credential. We talked about the Azure SDKs having a reliance on the Azure identity as the identity provider for authenticating the request and then passing it on to the other SDKs. At this instance, we do not want to use that pattern because the user has already signed on. They shouldn't have to sign in again, right? So I was speaking to the Azure SDKs team, and the conclusion was that we need to use a custom token provider. In effect, all this one is doing is passing back a token. So when the get token async gets called by the underlying code, we just return the token that we've already assigned. So in the constructor here, we actually pass a token, and we say if the expires on has not been passed in as well, then just set the expires in as the date now, whatever, right? And then the get token should just return the token that expires on date. That's the expected object. So for us, this takes away the onus of having to re-authenticate the user. We pass the existing token and it works. And as I said, we're expecting this to make it into the official SDK. So if you have an existing MSAL object or an MSAL instance, or if you already have a token, I think the whole point there would be to either pass the MSAL instance or pass your token and be done with it. So for now, we're using this one. And if we go back to our code, so we have a custom token credential. We instantiate that with the default expiry time. And then in the blob service client, which is now part of the Azure SDK's call, we pass the storage account name, which I've set further up, and then we pass the token credential, which is here. Okay. And at this point, because the token credential was never, because of the access token was never set, I was getting a 400 because it was like, I haven't executed that one, so let's pass it. So down here, you see we get 400. Authentication information is not given in the correct format because that was an empty string or uninstantiated. So this is where we are right now. This is where things are failing. But now we have changed the code, so things may work, right? So let's save this one. It auto-compiles for us, and then let's rerun the app and see what happens. Is it gonna be a 400? It checks again.
So where are you setting the scope?
Account is undefined. Right. Interesting. We changed the function to anonymous, and now this one is not set. Sorry, where am I setting the what?
Where are you choosing a scope? Well, yeah, we have to sort this problem out too, but where are you setting the scope for the token you're requesting?
Just give me a second and I will show you. So the scope is set here in the request. The request scopes, user.read, which are graph, and then user impersonation, which is the one that we need for storage.
Where's the... So we need... Okay, let's get this other problem solved first.
Sure.
So, let's see. Access to... so this is happening further up, right? Mm-hmm. I think around line 40.
Yep.
Okay, so emitter on login. I'm just going to run this account. Now, this.account is undefined. Now, let me see what emitter is doing. I think emitter might actually be writing to the other class, in which case it may not actually be that useful. Let's see. So emitter on some event function arg, and then emitter emit. Okay. And it's got a callback and then a context. Okay.
Can we have an anonymous async function as a callback?
Well, you're giving it your callback right here. I'm just curious as to what the scope of this might be, especially if it's saying that account. Okay, so we're passing in account. So where are we getting the account?
it's passed as part of the metadata that is try bind, though, this at the end of the anonymous function.
Okay. So after, so line 44.
Line 44 bolt.
Yeah, this is our anonymous function, right? So we want to bind. Do it there.
Yes, 44. So dot bind.
Outside of the thing.
Bracket.
Although
I can type this morning. Nice. This. Huh. Interesting. Save. See what happens.
Sorry, on the curly brace, on one character in.
Huh. So I had to write the first time. Okay. No build errors. So let's see what happens now. Oh, well done.
Okay. So now
this. Oh, check this out.
Okay.
This now has the local data object.
Okay.
Interesting. It didn't call the. Okay, so we're inside the get Azure Storage data.
Okay. So we're gonna have to change those scopes because we can't request two different scopes from two different resources.
Oh, okay.
But it's fine. It's great that it's actually making it. So that's good. Thanks,
I
Paul.
think it just returns here now. That's the problem.
Huh?
See? It's not calling the. It's not going into the try.
Well, no. Well, it is. You see, you notice you're getting this. The promises. I think the debugging is causing it to jump around a little bit because of the promise that's there, but it is trying to call storage because otherwise we wouldn't get that error from the storage system, right? So.
But this one gets called down here, so it goes all the way here. So I wonder if we need to stick this inside. Well,
hang on. Fix your scopes first.
Okay, let's fix the scopes.
So the scope for storage is, I think, storage.azure.com.
The fully qualified one?
Yep.
I think that's down here, isn't it? Do you have a link?
No, I'm just looking at old code. Hang on. I'm pretty sure it's in the portal. I mean, you can go look at it in the portal.
Okay.
Because you're going to have it in there.
Sure. So if we go into storage. Right, let's see. App registrations. And then we have a view app registration, which is down here. View with storage. Let me make this bigger so people can see what we're doing. And then API permissions. This one?
Yep. You can get the whole scope name out of it there. Go back. Well, the scope itself is storage.azure.com. If you click user impersonation specifically, you should be able to get the fully qualified scope name to copy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Found. Thank you.
You can't use shorthand scopes with anything except for graph scopes.
Ah.
It's the only thing you can use like user.read or whatever with.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is our install instance ever actually getting created? Okay. And whether or not that MSAL config object is available. So let's go ahead and run it and see what we get.
So this is from up there. I'm just making sure that we have the right call, because in the past I was calling the global version. Okay, run this one.
Sure.
So the request is now the correct one.
Mm-hmm.
MSAL instance is created.
Okay.
Then hopefully we'll get one or see. It doesn't seem to come in here. That's my concern now. It's like super weird.
Is there some sort of an indentation, or do we have too many or too few?
Are you talking about like terminating statements? So this one gets created properly.
So try, let's see, so we got our try for acquire silent, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I wonder if we should just call MSAL up here, MSAL acquire token pop-up and see what happens. Like right below here on line 58.
I mean, you could always take the try and the catch block out.
Yeah.
Just comment out 60 and then 65 through 71, 72, however far down it goes.
Okay.
Don't even try to catch the error around token response. But,
and what? Just
well, I mean,
call
keep 61, 62, 63.
Okay. Too many there. I'm gonna comment this out.
Yeah, we don't need. I wouldn't do anything in the catch.
Yeah. Okay, that compiled. Back to our page. No, sorry. So used to using ads now that I automatically went to my ads. At the edge of my seat. Right?
See, put a breakpoint on 58.
Okay.
Is getting an MSAL object, that shouldn't be async. I don't think it is, so, okay.
So the MSAL instance is set, and we have the config here as well, right?
Yeah.
See? Okay.
Is there can you do just do a var access token? I don't think we need to do a let there.
Okay. Let this fly. Make it a var. Oh, it likes vars. Does it like var? Okay, it likes vars.
It's just a scope difference. It should be fine.
Fun with JS this morning. Thank you for joining us. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. MSAL instance is set. Token is set. No, man, it just jumps out.
Is this not a count anything?
Right now it says undefined. But we know that we're not returning. Do you think it should... Like it would return at this point, right? It wouldn't evaluate in here.
Well, it almost seems like it's getting evaluated more than once.
Oh, and then comes back as null and then it just returns? Because of the asynchronicity of...
Well, I'm not sure. Go back up.
Yeah.
Or there's an error. The thing you're using to get your config for MSAL, pull that out and make that something. Scroll over. What is that? How are you getting the MSAL?
This is from our session state.
Okay. Do we need...
We saw that this is coming out with the right config settings, right? So we know that this is executing. Oh, you think that this is coming as whatever blank and then it just fails?
Well, no, I'm wondering, well, what do you have in MSAL config? What's in that object?
Yeah, let's go and have a look. So that's part of our store. And in here we have the auth, which points to the app registration and our authority, and then the cast location.
So do we need, I mean, do we need that in a store? Because it never changes, right?
It never changes, you're right. But we are using it in two different locations.
But that's okay. I mean, it's just an object though, right? Like we could just declare an object somewhere. Yeah. I'm just wondering what other plumbing is required in order for this to come back. And since it isn't dynamic data at all, it may be better for us to just take it out of here. Just use it where you need it for the moment to see to see where the errors are coming.
Sure. So in here we can say let, right? Or wait a minute, what was the object? Oh, MSAL config, sorry. I copied the wrong thing, so it should be this one. So MSAL config there, we can pass it directly here. So that eliminates the issue. So everything is local now.
Yep. Well, you gotta. It needs to have a name. It doesn't have a name right now.
Yeah, not?
Nope.
Like let? Oh no. Wait a minute. There. Compiles. Okay, that went through. It's still pending there. We forgot about that. Let's run it again. Let's see if our oh, wait a minute. Breakpoint. Okay, request is coming there.
Take out that if this dot account. Take that out. I think that I feel like this is getting called multiple times, and so we're seeing it happen essentially at different points. So this is in your main, right? This is essentially in your this is components only being called once, right?
Yep.
And it's happening on created?
Created. Yep. I mean, we could actually put a button in there to say, respond to this at the... Jumped out again. It jumped out again. No account in silent request.
What if you just put a breakpoint on 67?
Well, I mean, we've got a different error message this time.
Yeah. Put a breakpoint on 67.
Let's do that. Okay.
That's fine. Just okay. So it's not even breaking on it. Scroll up a little bit. Get rid of any old state you might have in the application tab.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Gone.
Okay, run it again.
I think we need to authenticate. Okay, authenticated. And now we're saying pass an account in silent, so it's like no account in silent request. Please pass an account object. Silent flow is not supported without account information. Now this time it's executing the MSAL. It doesn't go into the Azure SDK, so it's failing. Now we need to do the non-silent prompt, right? So here we need to do
yeah, so
remove the try.
So this is where we need to do the catch. So that if for some reason we can't, which in this case, of course, nobody's logged in, so we don't have an account, then we go and try an interactive one.
Okay, so trying again. What? Oh, you know what? I know why. Maybe this is the This is the line that it has been causing.
It might not be the right. That might not be the right error message.
Yeah.
Interaction required is fairly old. I think it's a little bit different now. In fact, based on the error message you just showed, I don't think that's the one we use anymore.
Okay. Third time lucky. Well, that's probably millionth time lucky.
Okay, so now you're getting a pop-up. Okay.
Right.
And, oh yeah, you need approval.
Yes.
So, yeah. All for not. Because we can't access it. Because you can't grant consent.
Oh, it's because, damn it.
Yeah, that's fine.
So close.
Yeah,
I can use my own tenant, but then again, it won't have any storage data, right?
Yeah, that's fine. We can't consent. So go back to your code for a minute.
Sure.
So what was the actual problem? This started when we quit looking for this account, right?
Yep.
When that guard was removed at the beginning?
Oh, no, it was, we're looking for this account. It was coming back as null, probably because of the scope of the asynchronicity, right? So it was coming at a different time.
Well, I'm wondering if there's something in the Vue lifecycle that would call created to be called more than once. I don't know why, but it's certainly possible, I suppose. I wonder if mounted. Let's see. I wonder if mounted might be better instead of created. I'm trying to find the life cycle here. Let's see.
Isn't that annoying or what, man? I mean, we're so close to using our Azure Storage data. Console.log everything. Yes, let's log everything. Everything goes into the log. You're absolutely right. Star. How do I pronounce that? I'm not as good as a hacker.
Starfox.
Starfox.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to get consent. I mean, I can create you a really quick and dirty app over here, and you can use it. So just hang on a sec, I guess. I'll give you some different. Of course, I don't have an account for you, so it's fine. Anyway, I mean, the net of it is, yeah, you're not going to be able to access it because you don't have. We don't have anybody to consent, right? Because we need an administrator to consent for us. And in Azure AD, if you're working for an org, your company or your organization can say nobody can consent, and that's essentially what our organization has done. So we would have to go open a ticket in order to get access to storage. So
and we also have to justify it, right?
Yeah, so you can sign in and you can get users signed in. The default behavior is not that. So if you were to just go have your own Azure AD somewhere, you wouldn't have to deal with that. But unfortunately, we do have to when we're using corporate resources, which is kind of why we're in the position we're in. So,
I think we got the point now that like 95% of the code is working, right? So the one thing that we can display is logging the containers into console, because initially I was going to log them into console and then create a table around them and stick them into a nice table, and show them, and even extend that in the future to say add a new, upload something into Blob. The Azure SDK makes it fairly straightforward to use. The important bit here is that we managed to get the authentication to work all the way to the point that we need to get consent, which is great. So down here is this is the only piece of code that we couldn't execute, to be honest, unfortunately. There you go. Oh, actually, no, we haven't gone to the point that we're testing the custom token credential.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But that custom token credential is going to need to have a scopes. It's kind of a dictionary of scopes in there, right? Because different access tokens may be in the cache for different things. Of course, if you're doing it beforehand, maybe that's not as big of a concern. But the scope for, say, storage is going to be different than the scope for graph, or for different sort of high-level resources, because you only get one access token back at a time, right? So.
Right.
So anyway, that's fine though. This is a good point to break, right? Yeah, we'll take a break, and maybe when we get back, we'll switch it over to B2C and get into the claims, the new API connectors for for B2C. So we'll be back in 5 minutes, maybe about 31, 32 after the hour. And we'll see everybody in just a couple minutes.
Yeah, stick around, guys. Thank you very much.
All right, we're back. So now we've got to now we're going to switch gears a little bit. So B2C, if you're not familiar with Azure AD B2C, Azure AD B2C is it's essentially our consumer login service. So if you were building an app for, say, the internet, right, or for some group of people who, your customers or people who aren't part of your organization, if you've just got a password database or whatever, B2C is sort of that's our thing. That's what we've got, right?
Yeah.
And B2C can do a billion different things, but the things that it does to start out with are pretty straightforward. If you want to sign a user in with a username, or just give them a brand new username and password, or if you want to sign them in with one of these identity providers like Facebook or GitHub or whatever, we sort of have these out of the box. So you can just come in and configure these, and your users can start to sign in. So if we go look at what that looks like, let me get a new browser window over here. If we go look at what that looks like, let's get a private one going over here. If I can remember how to open a private window. Let's go take a look at what that looks like, right? So, let's see, B2C. So this is a typical sign-in form, right? So nothing too crazy. We've got a place where you can sign in with a username and a password. We've got a place where you can sign in with one of the different ones that I had already configured. So you want to sign in with Google, if you want to sign in with Facebook or Amazon, whatever, you can do that. You can even sign in with something called Don't Use This Too, which I don't even remember what that is, and so I'm not going to use it because it told me not to use it. But on the most basic, if I just go sign in with a username and a password, then I'll go back over to my app, and this is what my app will receive, right? So do we just get an access token, or excuse me, an ID token, and that token has a bunch of data about who I am. So when it expires, that sort of thing. But then we have things like my name, we have the email address that's associated with that account. Pretty straightforward. So if you want to just have sign in on your app, and you want to replace like a password database, B2C is sort of the way to go, right? So we configure our identity providers. I've got a lot of these configured, which is why the list is so long. And the other thing we do is configure what we call a user flow. And a user flow is essentially just that. I need a user to sign in. So I've got this one here called sign in or sign up. So you'll notice with Susie a whole lot, and Susie is sign up or sign in. And what we just looked at was a sign up or sign in policy. And in that policy or in that user flow, this is where we have all the different kinds of ways to configure it. So we've got things like which accounts should somebody be able to use. So if we didn't want to allow, say, Google, we could uncheck that, and then it wouldn't show up in that list, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got our flow. In fact, we'll just create a new one, because why not? So we're going to create one called sign up and sign in. And we'll use the recommended version because it's recommended. You'll notice there's some other ones too, profile editing, password reset. So if you want to let your users do either one of these, you can do those with these. And then sign up and sign in as separate activities. So like if you have one, if your app needs to sign up a user differently than how you would want a user to sign in, or if you need to capture different data or whatever, you can create one that stands alone as one of these. But for today, we're just going to use sign up or sign in, because for the most part, that tends to cover most things, right? You notice we haven't written any code or anything like that yet. So I'm going to go ahead and create one, and I'll just call this Susie. We'll call this Susie API. And so now we have to choose who do we want to allow people to sign up with or sign in with. So I'm going to use email.
At minimum, you want the local accounts, right?
Yeah, so we're going to have local email, so you can use your email address to sign up. You could also make this username if you wanted somebody to have a username and not email. And we'll use social too, because why not?
Yeah.
I'll just check them all.
Bring on the social.
We'll just check them all because they're all here, right? So we've got all these social providers that somebody can use to sign up with. And we're going to create this. So now we have our user flow created, and it's this one here called SUSE API.
Well, you went all out. You chose everything. Nice.
Yeah. So we've got everything in here, and there are two extra pieces. There are what we call user attributes and application claims. And a user attribute is something you can capture from a user. So you can ask the user for this. So let's ask the user for the display name. And, well, let's just ask them for their display name. That's the only thing that we need to ask the user for is their display name, which is what's going to show up, what will show up in our app. So we save that, and we go over and look at application claims. And these are the claims that are going to be sent back to your app after a user signs up or signs in when they're using this one specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because we're asking for their display name, that's because we want to show it. So we're going to check display name, but we also want to get, let's say, their email addresses. Let's also get their, let's see, what else could we get? Let's grab their... we're going to get their identity provider by default, so we'll know if they used Facebook or Google or whoever to sign in. And well, we don't need an access token for the provider, so we'll skip that. I think this is all we need, just display name and email addresses. That should be enough. So let's save that. And now we're going to go run it. And if we run it, we have to choose an app that we want to sign into. So you may be asking,
Correct.
well, where do these apps come from? So let's back up for a sec. We have these things called app registrations, and app registrations are sort of a way to say, hey, I've got this app, and this app needs to be created so that we can use an app to go talk to something, right? So we'll create a new registration. I'm just going to call this jwt.ms because that's the site that we're going to be going to, and we're going to put that in as a redirect URI. In some cases, this could be, this is the title of your app, so this doesn't have to be a URL.
Yep.
This could just be a string. It doesn't really matter. This is the title of your application, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're going to see in the portal, so make sure it's named something that you're going to recognize. So we've got this one here. I'll just call it JWTMS because that's how we're going to go look at the claims. The redirect URI is where your application is going to be hosted. And you can have multiples of these. It doesn't have to be just one. So you may have localhost 3000 if you're using Node, and you may have myapp.azurewebsites.net. So this is where your app is ultimately going to live. We'll keep this box checked because we're doing B2C. We don't want to break anything. So we'll hit register. And now we've created an application called jwt.ms-api. Right? And if we look under authentication, the one that we put in here is already here. And because we're going to be using this external site, we're going to go ahead and enable ID and access tokens for implicit grant. An implicit grant is sort of an older way of getting access and ID tokens to your apps, an older way to let users sign in without necessarily having to, without having any server-side component. So
question here, right? So if you have different apps consuming the same app registration. So let's say you have a single-page app and your jot.ms, if jwt.ms. Let's not anger the linguist in us. If I am using, say, my Vue website to call into this one, I will not be using implicit flow, right? Because the MSAL.js 2.0 supports non-implicit flow, and therefore, even though you have checked that in here, it will not be using that flow. Is that correct?
Correct. It's only enabled, so someone could still craft a request to do it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And the Azure AD service would come back and agree and give back a token.
So Patch Fox Live on our channel is asking, how secure is the implicit flow? Well, we try to avoid implicit flow because you have to have the client credentials somewhere stored in the code, and we don't want that to happen. So hence the reason why we're moving away from an implicit flow.
Yeah, the big thing about implicit is essentially, let me get my notepad out here, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
When a typical sort of authorization code flow in OAuth 2. So if we were to do an OAuth code flow, what we do is in our app, we create a redirect. So we 302 over to login.microsoftonline.com, and then we have all the OAuth parameters. So it's like OAuth 2, V2, client ID, which is like your app ID, blah, 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 blah. The big thing we have here is a response type of code, right? And what we will get back, so when the user does this, the user's well, yeah, you're right, Bolt. It will be B2C login when you're using B2C. So let me change that. So I won't change it. Doesn't really matter. So we got a user. User comes to your app, and then your app is going to send them over here. They're going to do an HTTP redirect to this. It's longer, but essentially it's this. Then the user goes over to log in. So now the user's over on one of our sites. So this is on the Azure AD B2C login page, and the user's going to log in. So this is where they're going to type their creds, they're going to click Facebook or whatever, and they're going to get logged in. So that may even take them somewhere else. They may go over to Facebook, sign in, and then they're going to come back to B2C. But so B2C is going to sign the user in somehow, either through a username and a password or through Facebook. How that happens, how B2C does that, doesn't really even matter because you don't have a ton of control over it. You do if you need it, but your app doesn't have to concern itself with what it needs to do.
That's the nice bit.
So at that point, in a typical server-side thing, your app's server, so this is .NET, this is Java, this is Node, etc. Your app's server is going to get back something that looks like this. It's just a long one-time use code, right? It's like I don't know, it's a lot of characters. Say it's 100 characters, right? It's just random data. It's not a token though. It is just a code. So your app server is going to get back this thing called a code, and then what your app server is going to do is your app server is going to send the code over to Azure AD or B2C. And then Azure AD and B2C is going to send back the tokens that you requested to the server, right? So this is what's called the auth code flow. Now, the reason why this is sort of the default, this is the standard, what happens here is in this request that your app server is going to make, your app server sends a code, the code that it received from up here, right? But it's also going to send in some identifying information about itself. So not only is it going to send its code, it's going to send its client ID, and it's also going to send a client secret or a client certificate. And that client certificate's like an X509 kind of thing, right? So it's going to send in these 3 bits of information. And this way, Azure AD or B2C or whatever auth server you're using, this is a standard flow. Because these 3 are available, Azure AD can say, hey, I just sent that code, and this application has identified itself so that I know the code that was requested for app ABC was actually received by app ABC, and app ABC is the thing that's trying to do this extra little hop to get the actual token. So this is just a string, right? It's just a GUID. This is also just a string, and of course this is certificate data, right? This is a kind of, it's sort of like an asymmetric flow. So there's some extra stuff that happens when you're using a certificate, but essentially it's the same thing. We have the code that we have the code that Azure AD just sent in, and then we have this client ID and this client secret. The key here is this is all happening on your server, right? Because it's happening on your server, your web server should be secure enough that you have somewhere to store a secret.
Yep.
Where ideally people can't find it. If you're using a certificate, you can use the Windows Search Store. If you're using a Linux box, you can put it wherever you need to and secure it appropriately, right? Like, there are all sorts of ways to store a certificate or to store a secret securely in any sort of web server OS of your choosing. And so that's this is a fairly straightforward pattern, right? I've got a code, I've got a client ID and a secret. You can almost think of this as being like a username and a password, but just for your application, not for a specific user. So because this is happening on your server, you can control this client secret, and it puts you in a good place because now you know and Azure AD know, hey, the application I sent this code to is the actual application that asked for it, and I can validate that by the fact that we have a client ID and a client secret.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put this right here. All right. Notepad. I'm going to open up another one. Oops, that's not the right notepad. That's not the right notepad either. Notepad. Here we go. Now, when we're doing implicit flow, things get a little dicey. So in the implicit flow, I gotta use my mouse wheel, it's too slow otherwise. In implicit flow, this is when you're on something like a single page app. Because the JavaScript is only executing in the user's browser. So it's essentially untrusted. In the sense that you have zero control over the environment in which the code is being executed. If somebody has a browser that can interpret JavaScript, then it's going to run, and it's going to... You don't have any control over that. And the biggest thing about this is all of these things still happen. So, you may still be redirected, or you may get a pop-up. The difference here is the response type is going to be something like ID token. And since you have no app server, because you'll still go to B2C, so you'll still go to B2C, sign in with username or password, or social. The problem is B2C doesn't have a server to send your thing back to. So instead, it's going to send it back to your browser. So now it sends it back to your browser. And now your browser has to go figure out what to do with that. We can't store a secret in the browser, right? We can't. Yep. There's no way for us to store a client secret or a client certificate in our browser. So there's no way for us to say, I've got this client secret that identifies the whole application. There's no way for us to say, please don't touch my secret. Please leave it alone.
Yep.
Right? Because it's happening in the user's browser. So even if you figured out a way to store it securely in the browser itself, the user could always look at their network traffic and see the request as it's being made. Right? So there really is no effective way to store this client secret or client certificate locally, or wouldn't really be locally, but in the user's browser in a way that you could rely on it always being correct. So instead, we skip this part, and your browser just receives the token it asked for.
Yeah.
And usually this is in either the query string or it does a post, or it comes in the body back to your web app, right? And because this is all happening in JavaScript, it's all in your browser, and it means we're missing that third leg, right? We're missing that middle leg. So essentially, we have no idea that the app the user is using is actually the correct app. Now, we have the advantage of, not many people are going to be able to go, like if you can go and deploy an app to Microsoft.com, then we probably have bigger problems, right? So you still have some protection in the sense that Microsoft.com as a domain is still controlled, and because we tell we have to set the redirect URL to be something like whatever that's going to be, we still have this advantage. So obviously things like redirect URLs are still safe. However, if we have to send it in the browser, all sorts of network interception tools could pick it up. You could pick it up with Fiddler. You could pick it up wherever. Your company's proxy could pick it up in the middle, right? If it's a TLS proxy that does all of the man-in-the-middle stuff. All sorts of people could go and see that because it's essentially sent back in the request, right?
Yep.
So implicit is one of those that's sort of a necessary evil previously. And so implicit was the way that you did it. So if you wanted to do implicit, or if you wanted to use a JavaScript single-page app, you essentially had to use implicit. And what that meant was that you had to really scope your app really, really carefully to say, I absolutely only want these permissions to be available for this app because I can't ever actually verify that that app is the app that it says that it is, right? So then, and that's the way that MSAL v1 worked. And this has been a pretty big part of the web for a long time. Now, the third way that we do this is what we call Auth Code with PKCE. And
Not XIE, because when I first joined the team, everyone was like, PKCE. I was looking, what is authentication with PKCE? Couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's like public key code exchange, I think. Maybe it's is it PCKE? It doesn't really matter. PKCE.
Oh, it's PKCE, yeah.
So essentially, the short version of this is that this gives you single-page app in JavaScript without implicit. So you have no implicit, you can still use a single page app with JavaScript because there are 2 extra fields that are sent. One is called code verifier, and there's another one whose name eludes me at the moment. But essentially, there's an extra bit of data that's sent during the request. So when we have our request here, this response type code, essentially there's an extra piece of data that's sent right here, and is a one-time use. It's a one-time secret. It's basically valid for just that round trip. And so instead of us having to store a secret in the browser like we would normally, instead we use this one-time secret, and now we get auth code with PKCE directly in the browser. So what happens now is when I come back, so now we're back at your app makes a CORS request, or makes a essentially makes a XML HTTP request, an AJAX request, over to Azure AD, and does the code swap there. Right. So this way, Azure AD still knows who your application is, right? Because there's that secret exchange that happened up front, but it's not an ongoing sort of permanent secret, right? So yeah, and like Bobby Tables is saying, browser plugins and extensions, injected scripts, like your browser, if your browser is compromised in any way, essentially you're going to have some trouble, right? Because you're going to be in a place where somebody could get to your MSAL cache, or they could see requests that are coming and going, and then go and replay requests just like. In fact, there was just a malicious Chrome extension I was reading about last week. It was an ad blocker. I can't remember what it's called, nano ad blocker maybe. Anyway, so the maintainer, he sold it to some developers, and the first thing that they did was they updated it to go and steal cookies and stuff, and go like a bunch of pages on Instagram and things like that. So yeah, your browser plugins and everything are all going to have access to the majority of this. And then Bolt has a question of, is it safer because the secret is one time than persisted? The thing is that what makes it safer is the fact that the secret is essentially for this request, right?
Right.
So if, in this case, here, when we're using our app server in a traditional auth code server-side flow, this client secret is the same client secret until it expires. So if you've got one user using your app, or if you've got 9 million users using your app, they're always using, your app server is always using the same client secret to go back and do that code exchange with Azure AD.
So easy to leak, right? That's a problem there.
Well, but it's also that there's nothing specific about it. There's no specificity to the request or to the user or to really anything. There's just nothing specific. The only thing that's specific about it is that app 123 has this secret that it uses to identify itself, and that could be, and that would never be on a per request basis.
Right.
And when we're doing auth code in the browser, because it's a one-time secret, it's essentially a one-time secret for just that request, for just that sign-in request, meaning you're never sharing a long-lived, ongoing secret with any specific request browser side. So that's essentially where a lot of the extra sort of security comes out of it. Also, PKCE is really important for like Safari ITP. So if you're using an iPhone and you notice you can't log into things, it's probably because some of the tracking protection stuff that was in Safari and iOS, I think it was iOS 14, may have been 13 too, but in iOS 13 and 14, some of these different libraries used lots of little tricks to do like iframe refreshes and iframe posts to get tokens on an ongoing basis without a user signing back in. Moving to PKCE will help with that. So if you're using, this is available in a package called MSAL browser, and you'll also hear this called MSAL.js 2.0. That's where this is available. So if you're using this here, you'll be fine for any mobile browser. However, if you're still using some of the, this is essentially MSAL 1 in that tree, you may have problems with iOS, with Safari ITP. So
Right.
We want people to migrate as quickly as they can once it makes sense for you and your app. So if once your app is ready and if it's open for some reason, this should be relatively close to a drop-in replacement. We did a replacement on an app that we had built a few weeks ago on the show, and it was drop-in. Didn't make any changes. So as long as you sort of stick to what the API for MSAL looks like, this is intended to be very close to drop-in. You might have a few little changes here and there, but largely it's just drop-in. Okay. That was an interesting detour. So anyway, now that we've took a 10-minute detour on a 4-line paragraph, now we're here to access tokens and ID tokens. Because the app that we're using, which is jwt.ms to start, because that is a browser-based app, we're going to have to use access tokens and ID tokens. We're going to have to enable implicit for both of those. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll save it.
Yep.
And it even gives you a warning now. This app has implicit settings, blah, 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 blah. Right? So it's going to tell you, Azure AD is going to tell you, and B2C are going to tell you, hey, you should really consider using PKCE if you can. We can't for the moment, so we're not going to use it.
Hey, by the way, Bolt.io is asking, will there be availability to have B2C login embedded in the iframe?
I have heard that question a whole lot, and I hear a lot of, every time, it's sort of like when you take a grenade and you throw it in the middle of like a giant bowl of Jell-O, and then you run the other direction. Every time anybody asks about that, that's kind of what happens. So nothing that we can share, at least. I know that a lot of people are talking about it. It's hard to do the it's probably.
How did you come up with the Jell-O thing? Like I haven't heard of that before.
Well, so last week I had a meeting Friday night at like 5:30 in the evening, and my boss was supposed to be there. And essentially what he did was he threw a grenade in a room full of people, and then he ran the other direction. And then I was left standing there because I got on the call, and they're like, well, what's this call about? I'm like, I don't know. I was invited. I didn't realize it was my meeting. Like, well, your boss scheduled it. I'm like, oh, well, yeah. I don't know then. I don't really know what to do. So I was thinking about that, but I thought like throwing a grenade in a room full of people was a little harsh. So I said, well, you throw it in a bowl full of Jell-O, because my son he had some Jell-O for the first time the other day, and he was pretty unsure about it. So,
oh, he wasn't ecstatic?
No, he didn't like the way it tasted. He thought it was fun to play with, but he didn't like the way it tasted. And yeah, Bobby Tables, Friday meeting at 5:30. Welcome to my life, man. That's the problem when you work with a bunch of West Coast people.
That's exactly the problem.
They're like,
East Coast people.
I'll schedule a 3 p.m. meeting for me, not realizing that it's 6 o'clock for me. Why didn't you come to that meeting? Sure, it was Friday at dinner time at your house. You know. Anyway. Okay. So we've registered our application, and so we have this app ID, like the mythical app or client ID that we were just talking about, right? So we're going to put this in. We're going to put this over here on a note so that we can keep it for a few minutes. We got our client ID. So now we have an application that's been registered, right? So let's get back over to our user flow, and let's go find the one that we just created. We called this one Suzy.
You might want to zoom in a little bit.
We called this one Suzy API. So this is the one that we just created a couple minutes ago. So let's run it. Now you'll notice when we hit run, we get all the applications that are available for us to use. What did we call the one that we just created? jwt-ms-api. And you'll notice we only have one reply URL, so no big deal. And then we have this endpoint. And so we can just run this. We can just test it, right? I'm going to copy it and go over to our in private window, because that'll be a little bit easier, because I got a bunch of windows open, or a bunch of tabs open in here. So let's get a new private window up. We're going to paste that in here. We'll zoom in a bit, and here we go. So here's our login page, right? So I'll log in with gmail.com. And if we sign in, we're going to go over to our other application, jwt.ms, which is just our sort of token revealer. And we're going to see all the data that's in it. So we see my name, which we asked for, which was display name. And we see emails. Super cool, right? Just kind of like what we looked at a minute ago. So this is what your app can expect to receive. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to look at, right? So your app's going to receive something like this. And this is cool and whatever. And we can even do some things with what we call custom claims. So in B2C, there's this concept of these custom attributes, right? So in user attributes, like we have all these that come out of the box. Email address, display name, city, all that sort of stuff, right? But we also have the ability to do custom ones. So you'll notice I have one here too called some custom property. Let's just go create a new one, and we will call this another custom property. And then we have things like string, bool, and int. This is what you get. You can get a number, you can get a string, or you can do true, false. We're just going to do a string for the moment. And we'll just say, tell me something better. And it's called another custom property. In fact, I'm going to go put this over here in our notes so that I don't forget what it's called. So let's go ahead and create that property. Now this property is going to be available for any application to use. And because we've created this property now, we can go back to our user flow, our API flow, and in our user attributes, if we want to ask the user for that data, we can ask them for it by checking this box. But we don't want to ask the user for it in our case. But in our application claims, so the things that are sent back to the app, we do want to get it. So we're going to check this box that we want another custom property to be sent to our application whenever a user signs in.
So what sets that value then? If we're not setting it via the user, how are we getting it?
So you can set it through the Graph API. That's one option. You could also, if you're using custom policy, you can set it through whatever. Now, and this has all been around for a long time, right? So you've got this another custom property. Now the cool thing is, or maybe not cool, but historically what we would do, how do we fill that thing in with data? Well, we've got the Graph API. We have other APIs available too. If we want to use another API to fill that data in, say we're migrating from an existing system, we already have some big system that we've purchased, like a Salesforce CRM for our customers or something, like whatever. Like there are all sorts of reasons why you may need to get some custom data. You've got custom data about your users, like authorization data that's living in a database in your app. All those are perfectly valid, right? Historically, you've always been able to call a REST API.
Right.
And so you could just call an API of your building, of your choosing, and say, send in some data, get some data back, and then tack that on to the user. The only problem with that was that in order to do that in B2C, and because your REST API could really do whatever you wanted it to, right? It could do 15,000 different tasks and operations to go and get a user ready or whatever. As long as it sends back data, it's fine. The problem with doing that, however, was that in order for that to work, you had to use this. I'm going to open this up so you can take a look.
What is this?
So in order to use this, in order to set up REST APIs, you had to open up a set of files that look like this, which is they're colloquially known as it's essentially a metric ton of XML, right? So you've got all this XML.
Are you trying to scare people away from our channel today?
No,
Is that what you're trying to do?
I'm just saying that historically, if you wanted to use a REST API to capture extra data, you had to use this XML framework for going and doing that, right? And the XML framework there's a little bit of a learning curve. It can be a little steep, and some of these files can be fairly long.
I can see the scroll. It's not as bad as I assumed.
This one's not so bad. This one is kind of bad. This is sort of the base one, and it's 1,000 lines, right?
Yeah.
So you had to do this previously, and this is Synthwave 84. But that's the theme. So anyway, that was how you had to do it before, and it was kind of a pain because it's like, well, I can get to 99% of what I need to do using this portal interface to build this, but I need to call my API, and so now I've got to go and redo the whole thing. So now we've got these things called API connectors, right?
Nice.
And so an API connector in B2C pretty much is just that. It's a way to call a REST API without having to use XML. Without having to go and create what we call a custom policy, you can just go and call one of your own. Right?
So that means So if I wanted, for example, to take the incoming data and pass them into a backend database to do some extra queries and validation and reach the claims, then I can do that without having to write a custom policy.
That is correct. So that's what we're going to do. Perl and regex. Bobby Tables. I'm.
you're pushing it.
All right, oh, you're breaking up. We gotta go. See you, everybody. So anyway, so now we have these things called API connectors. So these are in preview in B2C, so don't take any production dependency on them yet. But you'll notice we have two main events that we can hook into. After signing in with an identity provider, so that's after I've signed in with, say, a Facebook. But before I've signed in all the way or created a user or been redirected back to your application. Instead, this is sort of after I've signed in and now B2C knows who I am and it's ready to start processing. So we can do it then, or we can do it before creating. So if, say, for example, you don't know who the user is because you've never seen their social ID before. Yeah, it's a new user, or somebody went through a registration step. Your registration flow may have extra steps. You may need to go wire up different things or treat people differently if they're brand new, send them welcome emails, whatever it might be. So you have these two options, after signing in and before creating the user, right?
Nice.
And if we look at this list, you'll notice that there are only these two. So instead, we're going to go to this Manage API Connectors. So like most things in B2C, you have this sort of collection of things, an identity provider, an app, an API connector. Yep. And your apps use them through user flows. So a user flow is sort of like the roadmap for a specific user experience or user interaction. And you compose a user flow with a bunch of other things like this, which is cool because it means you could use one function in 95 different user flows and you wouldn't have to rewrite it for each one.
Yep.
So let's go look at creating a new API connector. Now, right now, it's only basic username and password. That's all we have. It's just basic. So certificate and that sort of things, those are sort of on the way. But for right now, if you're going to use this today, you get a username and a password. So it's HTTP basic auth. Then it needs a name. So I guess for our name, we'll just call this, B2C test func. And the endpoint URL, I'm just going to use my local machine. So I will use ngrok for that. And I'll call this B2C test func. And the username, there really isn't going to be one, to be quite honest. Because it's going to be running on my local machine, but whatever. I'll just give it a username, and I'll give it a password of...
Hunter2.
Hunter2.
Password 1.
Oh, wait, there was no capital, was it? No, we'll just call this... whatever. The password is... ... If you ever saw Cable Guy. Okay, so we've got a... So this is what we're going to do. So we need to go create something locally that's going to respond to this endpoint, which we can go and do. So we've called B2C test func. So let's save that up. And then we're going to go build us a really, really quick and dirty API function in Azure Functions locally. So let's get back over here to our Suzy API. This is our user flow that we created just a few moments ago. And of course, you see API connectors here and API connectors here. We click this, and now we see our new B2C test func. And we're going to do this with after signing in with an identity provider, because that way we won't have to create a user every single time we want to do it. Yes. So let's save that. Okay, so we saved that up. And now let's go create a function. So let's see here. I should probably use PowerShell since we're going to do this in Windows. So let's go create us a folder. Go on, PowerShell, let's go. All right, so let's call this B2C API func. And let's see, let's go into that folder, B2C API func. And then this is, what is it, func create? I never remember doing these from the command line. Because everybody always yells.
Func init first.
Func init. We're going to use, I guess we'll use .NET, because that way it'll be fast. Func init.NET. And then let's see, we've got a question while this is running. If you return the custom attribute name in the validation step via API connector, will it be smart enough to persist it against the user? It's a really good question, Bolt. That's what we're about to find out. Good morning, AZ Wildfire. Glad you could join us. So let's see, we're going to do a func new.
AZ Wildfire, that's just 1080p, no 4K. We don't deserve 4K.
We're not streaming in 4K. I don't know. Can we upload? Can we upload 4K? I mean, I'm happy to try it. So
you got the button. I don't.
What did we call that? It was B2C test func, or
yeah,
B2C test func. Okay. So that's what it's gonna. That's what the function name is going to be. Yeah, bitrate of Twitch would not allow it. That's kind of what I thought. We're not big enough for anybody to go want to watch us in 4K anyway. Okay. So let's get into. Let's open this up.
I can gain some weight and get bigger. That's fine.
And in here, zoom this in a little bit. So we've got our B2C test func, and it's got an authorization level of function. It's a pretty standard one. So let's go look at what our API should be expecting, and what our API should be returning, right? So historically, these were always JSON blocks. So, I need to try Among Us, Bobby Tables. I was thinking about it. I don't know. I don't have much time to play video games. I wish I could. I wish I had more time, but I don't know. I feel like I never have enough time. I gotta try it. Can't you play it on your phone? So you can play it on your phone, then maybe it'd be cool to get down with it. So, okay, let's go look at. So this is a sample that's available. It's actually already available for this, right? So let's go look at the code for this. So this one has signupvalidation.cs, and if we look at signupvalidation.cs. This one's essentially limiting signups to only be from certain domains, from Fabricam with a K and Fabricam with a C. Right? This must be Fabricam after dark. So it's checking the basic authorization, which of course that was what we mentioned earlier, and then we get the body, we deserialize it. Yeah, nothing too crazy there. We look at the current user language, which of course is super important, and then this is really the meat of the work, right? So this is all that's really happening, is we're checking to see if the email data is available. We're checking to see if it has an email address in it. And if it doesn't look like an email address, then we just blow up and say, sorry, this doesn't work. Then we're checking the allowed domains. And again, the same thing. If it's not one of the allowed domains, we just blow it up and say, nope, sorry, not going to work. And then this one's also doing a job title claim to check to make sure that you're actually giving us a job title, right? So that looks fairly straightforward. I think we could probably implement this in about a quarter of the number of lines of code. The only other thing it's doing is returning this response content object. So let's go look at the response content object and see what is in there. And this is sort of the the contract that B2C is going to be expecting back. So it's looking for. So we're going to send. It looks like we're going to send back a continue normally. The API version is going to be there, which is 001 because it's all preview stuff. And then we have a user message, which is what we're going to show back to the user. And then we've got these three fields: version, action, and user message. Okay, so those are pretty straightforward. So let's just take this, because why not, right? Although this seems a little verbose, but whatever. Let's just take it and go look over here, and we'll just create it down here. So we're in our function. Let's call this response content. Okay, oops. So let's call this response content. I don't see really, I'm not entirely sure how much flexibility we're going to have here, but let's just take a look and see anyway. Looks like I've got an extra thing here. Okay, so we've got our response content class. And all it's really doing is setting a few specific headers on the content that's going to come out. So we're going to send an API version. So we're going to set our API version. We're going to set our HTTP method to continue, and then this is setting the status to a 400. If the status is 400, then it sets the status to 400. I'm not entirely sure why this is happening. Oh, because it's getting a status in. Never mind. So if the status is 400, then we're just going to set that status. Otherwise, it looks like we leave it alone. Okay. And then, yeah, this is a string. I don't know why we're getting tick marks there, but whatever, that's fine. Okay. Still doesn't like this. Status, let's see. Does not contain a definition for status and no accessible extension method. The status isn't created anywhere in here. That's kind of weird. I wonder why. Let's go back and look at this code again. I don't see status in here. Status is here, but we're setting this.status to a this.status that doesn't appear to exist. I'm not entirely sure where that came from, unless they're in this. No, that's just a sample namespace. I don't know.
Assert true dot equals true. I like that.
I guess we're gonna find out if it works or not. Okay. So essentially, though, this looks pretty. There's really nothing too crazy here. Deserializing the incoming data, which we're going to do. We'll log it so we can see exactly what we get. I'm fairly certain we get the bulk of the data that the user we have on the user. But let's go see. So we're just going to take this out for now. Typically, when you're doing B2C REST APIs, you need to send back a 409 conflict if there's an issue. Or 200. So I'm not sure what a 400 would be outside of a bad request, but that's okay. We'll come back around to that. And it looks like we need to do a restore. So let's get a restore here. Ooh, those are big letters. Is this how you're supposed to write .NET, Christos? I know you're very particular about how I write it.
You're messing with my OCD now. My marketing OCD is just hitting me hard. Well, the validation API connector needs 400. If you want to stop the user
validation API needs 400. Oh, right. Oh, right, to stop the user from signing up. Yeah, I wonder why that wasn't included. I guess we'll just go ahead and add it ourselves. So let's see, public string status. We'll just put this here. I don't really know if I like this class. We may just end up booting the whole thing, but whatever. Okay, so we don't need that. We don't need the user stuff. We do need the request body. So let's first log this data here. Log information. And let's just log the request body. Okay, and it's not called
just data.
It's just called log. Oops. Well, I don't want to log the I don't want to try to log the dynamics. I'll just take the body before it's deserialized to dynamic. And then don't really care about the response message. That's true. Don't do this in production, kids.
Do not do this in production.
So we're just going to log it just so we can see what we get. Because, yeah, that's the problem. This is identity data, so the identity data itself is going to end up in the logs. And, of course, you don't want PII being shared around like that.
And the whole point of having a delegated authenticator is that you don't have to deal with personal information and data. So avoid it.
So let's look at this response content thing here. And I think, do we have a parameterless constructor? We do. So let's just use that one, and then we will fill in the fields as we need to. So we've got action, which the default was continue. We've got status, which for us should be 200.
So we have gone with default values on the response content, since you're setting them anyway?
It doesn't really matter. And then user message, I don't think we actually need a user message. So where do we send back the data? Let's go take a look. I need to actually send back data, not just pause, start and stop things, because that's going to be kind of a drag. Okay.
So for anyone that has just joined us, we're working with custom connectors for B2C, so we can do some funky new stuff, which was announced recently, still in preview.
Yeah, so this is brand new, still in preview. So let's see. As a developer or an IT administrator, You can use API connectors to integrate your sign-up flows with web APIs, blah, 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 blah. Okay, validate user input data, integrate with a custom approval workflow, yep. Overwrite user attributes. This is the one that we're interested in. Reformat or assign a value to an attribute collected from the user. For example, if the user enters the first name in all lowercase or uppercase, you can format the name with only the first letter capitalized. Cool. This is essentially what we want to do, right?
Yep.
So, let's see. Once you configure it, blah, 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 the user information comes in as key value pairs in JSON, which we would expect. The API response can affect the execution. The API response can block a user, so that's when we send the 400 or the 409. But what we really want to do is overwrite attributes. And my hope is that we don't have to include this as a user attribute, but instead we can just send it back and it will be written. So let's go take a look. And then right now these are sign up only, not sign in. Mm-hmm. So we can't run this on every sign in. We can only run it on the first sign up. So when we're doing after, this is before attribute collection is not invoked with a local account. And let's see, use email or federated identity to look up claims in the existing system. Pre-fill the attribute collection page and make them available. Implement a block or allow list based on social. So that's one thing that we could do. And then before creating the user, this is after we've asked the users for data, but before the user actually gets written.
Yes, before it gets written into the B2C database, right?
That's right.
Clarify.
Yep. Correct. Before it gets written into the B2C database. So we're going to do this query external systems for existing data about the user to return it in the application token or store it in Azure AD. So this one, which is essentially claim modification, kind of similar here, but this one highlighted, querying existing systems, this is more applicable to what we're trying to do than this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look. So we add an API connector. And we already did all this, right? We've got our connector. Our connector's in there. So this is what gets sent. Perfect. So this is what we're going to see. We're going to see the email, the identities of the user. So this is a social identity here. So this is Facebook. Yep. This is the Facebook ID. We're going to see the display name, given name, surname, job title, street address, blah, 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 blah.
So are these all the claims that are requested as part of the auth?
No, these are the claims that are available on the user's object. So
that request will send everything.
That's what it looks like. Sending user attributes as key value pairs in a JSON body. The interesting part here is that you notice these two extension attributes down here. And these this is what we want to write to. We want to write to our extension attributes, right?
Yes. So these are the custom ones that we add as part of the user object.
Yep.
Very nice.
So the thing that we added earlier, what was that called? What did we call that one?
Another custom attribute?
Another custom property.
Another custom property.
Another custom property. That's what ours is going to look like. So I'm just going to scribble this down up here. Another custom property. Now the key here is going to be, because of how B2C works, the property itself is actually going to show up like this. Extension GUID _ another custom property.
So we have to split or search.
Well, we're actually going to write to this property. We're going to write to the same one, so we don't have to manipulate the name, but just know that when you create a custom property or custom attribute, the name is the suffix essentially to the word extension and then the GUID. So we're gonna see that when we deserialize this object that comes in, right? Okay, and for the moment, I'm just not going to send anything back because I'm kind of curious to see what this data looks like. My hope is
bold is like that GUID changes for each environment. I agree. It would be nice to be able to return the custom property based on the name, but I suspect that this would present challenges.
So the GUID that gets created is it's called the Azure B2C Extensions, or what is it? B2C Extensions app. It's that app ID.
Right.
Now, you can also do them differently, and you can set your own. And it depends on what. There's a whole discussion we can have on what custom attributes mean in B2C and how they get stored.
Right.
When you create them from the portal, all of the ones that you create from the portal should all have an identical extension GUID, because that GUID is driven by the app ID of the B2C extensions app.
Right.
So once we get it once, we shouldn't have to know it again. Of course, since we're not going to be doing anything with the app ID directly, we're just going to be taking whatever property we get and then renaming it or changing the value. We shouldn't have to worry about it too much at all. So let me go back over here. Let's go check the doc one more time. So this is what we're going to get in. Oh, sorry. You're right earlier. So only user properties and custom attributes listed in the B2C user attributes experience are available to be sent in the request. So, okay, so we get UI locales. That all looks good. We enable it. So here's an example request, and then this is the response. So a continuation, which is what we want to do. So this is a continuation response, and then a blocking response would be an exit in case we didn't want to do anything with the user. I'm not really worried about that because largely we don't really care. At this point, we don't care. We're not stopping. We're not trying to halt this, right?
Yep.
Okay. So let's go look and just see what we should expect back. I don't know where it is. Okay. So here's a continuation response. So this is what we need to send back. And look, it's perfect. It's exactly what we need. So we need to send back a version, an action, a postal code, and, well, postal code just because that's what it was. We don't actually need that. We need these two. We need version, we need action, and then we need, in our case, our extension attribute, right? So we want to send back our new message here. Oops. And we want to send back an action. I don't know if I'm going to use this response content thing. I'm kind of not sure I actually really like it very much. We're going to send back, let's see, extension, or sorry. We're going to send back, I'll just pull this up so that I don't have to keep on going back and forth. We are going to send back, all right, version, which is 1.0.0. According to the docs, this may be incorrect. We're going to send back action, which in our case is going to be continue. We're going to send back extension underscore our app ID underscore another custom property, and that value is going to be datetime, UTC now, toString, round trip, just so that we can make absolutely certain. Okay, we'll call it that. And then we got to go figure out, we got to go get our app GUID. And then we're essentially going to return that object, right?
Sweet.
Return new OK object result. Okay. So we need to go figure out this part. And then, there's this new interpolation, which I love this. Instead of doing toString, you just do a colon and then the string of the format you want to use.
Okay. Oh, yeah, for dates and stuff, right?
So we're going to log our data, which will be helpful. So we're going to log our data so we can see what's going to come back. And then we're going to return, and I'll just leave this out for the moment, just with a continue. That way we won't blow up our flow. So let's run this. And that's going to give us our actual URL. Let me go get ngrok up and running. If you're not familiar with ngrok, it's essentially like a sort of like a local tunnel. So you can hit this URL, and end up getting all the way back to my machine. So it's kind of like a local proxy, which is super, super helpful when it comes to debugging.
It creates a public URL that you can hit from anywhere, and it allows you to access it from wherever you are, and that's fantastic.
All right, so let's run this. Oh yeah, I got to go grab my launch config because apparently I don't have one for this function, and the one I have is incorrect. Let me come over here, launch. We get our launch JSON over here. Cool. Let's run this now. Should run fine. Run. What time is it? 1:30. Okay, good. We've got to wrap up here shortly. All right, so now we're running where we should be. Let's go look at our terminal. Looks like we're getting close. Come on. And there we go. So if we were to go hit this right now, this should be up and running. Meaning if we were to go hit our jpda ngrok.io, let me just pull this over here. Means if we hit this API B2C test func, then we're going to get something. Probably going to blow up. Oh no, we got a 200 because we're just returning. So cool. Okay, so that's available. So that's good.
Cool.
Let's go update our B2C flow here to use this one. We called this one B2C test func. We will do it before creating the user. So we'll save that. And we need to go make sure and check our API URL, make sure that they match. So backend API connectors. We'll go change that to that. Cool. So now we've got our endpoint. We're all ready to go here. Cool. So that's all set. Okay. So now let's go back to our user flow. And this was Suzy API. We got our API connectors all configured, so that's good. We're going to do it before creating the user. And the application claims we want to include another custom property. So let's run this and let's see if we actually get where we want to go. Let's see.
So we're going to use a new user now, right?
Yep, so we're going to create a new user. So let's do a private window. My buddy showed me this website called Mailinator. It's pretty neat. You essentially just go type in whatever and you get one. So like, I don't exactly know how to use it. There's a free way to do it. Oh, here it is, right? So I'll call this JPDA B2C test.
Just remember what it is, because I think you lose it once it happens, right? If you refresh or you come out of this page, you can't get it back to it.
Yep. So we're gonna. Oh, sorry. We're not gonna do a sign up or sign in. We're gonna do a sign up. So let's click sign up. And I'll use, let's see, JPDA B2C test at mailinator.com. Send a verification code, which we're going to get. Even though this is test, we would still advise that you keep that on because this has the potential to be a billable event. Because if you have a bunch of people sign up, those are considered active at least for that first month. Okay.
Yep.
So your code has been verified. You can now continue. Cool. So I'm just going to put in a password that hopefully nobody can see. Good.
It's okay. We know it's password 1. It's fine.
And a display name. I'm going to just put that so I know what it is in the future. So let's go ahead and create our user. And while we're doing that, I'm going to open up our function and let's see well, first let's see if our function is actually getting called. That'll be the moment of truth to see if anything's actually going to happen here. Processing. Oh, it did run. There we go. Executed, right?
Nice.
So if we look in the logs, we should see our data. Let's go take a look here. Here's our data.
Oh, very nice.
So let's take a look at this. Create a new file. I'll stop this here. And let's format this since it's JSON.
Yep.
All right. Let's see what data we've got available in here. Now, Sadly, we do not have our extension property.
Oh.
So we're going to try one more thing. We're going to go generate.
Does it need to be extended somewhere inside the BTC configuration?
Well, technically it says it needs to be available as a user attribute. So if we were to come, if we were to come here and see how we've got it as an application claim, if we set this as a user attribute, we'll save that. Now if we run it again, in theory, that's my question, is Bolt's question, which is, if we were to send it anyway, does it actually get persisted? And that's what we're going to go test and find out. My answer, or my hope, is that yes, that is what happens, because then I don't have to expose an ugly property to a user that they're never going to have any idea of what it is, right?
Yep.
B2C test2 at mailinator.com. Send a verification code. Where did that mailinator thing go? Is it in another window? I think it is. It is. Get our verification code. We got it. Verify. New password. New password. Not going to put any value in here at all. Make sure the function is running. It's not. That would be bad. Although I'm pretty sure in Grok we can go and look at all the requests that have come in, so we probably don't even necessarily have to worry about this too much. But at least we're going to get a 200 back so that it works.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Could also use the @alias for Google.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep. I use those aliases all the time. It's amazing how many people will send you email from places that they never belong. Okay, so this is up and running. Pull this out over here. Let's hit create. We should see our function get executed. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Run, 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 run. Oh, your passwords don't match. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't type the same one in correctly, so it's okay. Okay. So we hit create. Now, what do we get in this one? There we have our extension attribute, which is excellent. So now we at least know the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we know the name of our extension attribute. Let's go back into our code. There are other ways to look it up too, or you could always, of course, derive it based on your app ID. But so this is essentially our extension property. So what we're going to do, we're going to put this in here. We are going to take it out of B2C as a user collected attribute, but we are going to try to set it. You dig?
I do.
Okay. So let's take this out.
It works on Outlook too? Damn, I didn't know that.
Sure. Does it work on Outlook? I've never tried it with Outlook. I didn't think that it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. So now we've saved it. We've removed another custom property. So let's go create yet another user. Oops, sorry. Let's create a new user here. Run the user flow. We're going to sign up. We're going to be mailinator.com. See, I didn't think plus aliases worked on Outlook.com, so if they do, that's even better. I'm going to totally start using them all the time now. Let's go get our code here. Looks like our code is 946315. Let's give it a password. Give it a password. Display name. BTC API set. Okay. Make sure our code is running, which we have not stopped it, so we probably should start it and restart it again since we made a code change. And let's see what happens. So we're not collecting it from the user. It's not considered a user attribute at this point, but we're going to try to set it with a value. Mm-hmm. And if the set works correctly, then we should see that in the value in jwt.ms. And if we can't see it there, we'll go look at Graph Explorer and pull out all the stops. Okay.
Right.
Create. You ready?
Born ready. Let's do this.
Okay. I don't see it.
Execute it.
So it executed, which is great. We didn't send it, obviously, so it's not going to be in there. But I don't see it in the claims. Now let's go. Before we call the whole thing off, let's go make absolutely certain. That we made sure to include that in our application claims, which we did. So I am feeling less than optimistic that we'll be able to change it without sending it over as a user attribute first. And if that's the case, I will be very sad. Okay. API set at mailinator.com. Don't know why the tab doesn't take you to the password. Seems like it'd make a whole lot of sense. We're going to go over to jwt.ms, and I have no value. Because if we had a value, we would not. We would be null. Or if we had a value, then the value would be sent regardless of what it is. Let's go last ditch. Let's go look at the graph. See if the data actually got written to my user. Sadly, I don't think that it did.
Otherwise, it would be there, most likely.
Otherwise, it would be there. So we get signed in here, admin.
So you're signing into your BTC tenant right now, right?
I am.
Yes.
Well, that's the plan anyway, if I can remember my password.
Hunter 2. You don't have a password manager for this one? Like, you haven't started?
No.
I'm surprised.
Well, because it's usually in a private browser, so the thing doesn't run, so I never remember it.
Like, you have a public browser somewhere hidden away, right?
Yeah, it takes too long. You're talking about a lot of things that require a lot of effort.
Am I the only one who feels a bit better knowing that everyone struggles with extensions? Nope, you're not the only one, Beranger.
I'm going to just reset my password. Easy enough. Yep. Don't look at my password. Don't look at my temporary password. I'm pretty sure that was the last temporary password, too, which is a little terrifying, to be quite honest.
Nah, I doubt it. Maybe a deja vu somewhere?
You know, you're right. It probably actually is in there somewhere. In a password manager, I just don't care about it. So, because it's essentially a throwaway account. Okay, so let's go look at the graph and let's look at our users and see. Let's go find our user we just created. Mailinator. So that was B2C test. We want API set. There we go. This user. API set. So let's get this user's ID. So we can just pull this user back for the sake of simplicity. So this is our user, and if we look at the values or the data on our user, I'm worried we're going to be disappointed. Yep, does not look good. Not even there. Not there at all. Because if it's never been written, so the attribute doesn't show up until the first time it's written on a user object.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer because that means that you're going to have to expose that. So let's go through the full happy path and make sure that actually works. So this is our extension. Let's go create that one as a. We'll go make it a user attribute again. We'll go sign up one more time and we'll see what happens. All right, B2C. User flows. Probably already have this open in another tab, but whatever. API, user attributes, another custom property, save it up.
Doesn't exist, so I couldn't write it behind the scenes.
Yep, that's what we're gonna test that theory too there, Mr. Bolt. All right, let's run it. We go create another user. We'll just call this guy, this guy will just be B2C. No. We'll call it Atter at mailinator.com. Send a validation code. We'll get there. We're going to figure out how to make this thing work one way or the other. And if nothing else, at least we got lots of feedback we can go send back. Okay. Here's our mail, 670409. Verify. Let's give this guy a password. Display name. Hello. Another custom property. Null. Hit create. Our code just ran. There's our extension, another custom property, so that's good. So our function is working as expected. So this one is 2020-10-26. Oh, but you know what? Because it's only happening on connect, or because it's only happening on create,
right?
You'd really never have an option to... Yeah, I guess ultimately the thing you'd have to do would be your function could use client credentials to go right behind the scenes. That's probably essentially the thing I'm thinking. So the only way you to really be able to do this, until of course maybe we say if you wanted to do this today, but you didn't want to expose the property to the user, we would use client credentials in our function to go and do it. That's how we would achieve it.
Oh, okay.
So, which is kind of
a
bummer. But, let's go look at our user in the graph, make sure they're all good. They should be. We got our user ID here, our subject. Well, let's go put this in our graph and see what's going on. Run. There's our user. We look. There's our extension attribute. There's our value. So it does work, which is excellent. I just think the key is going to be if you want to set a value without sending that value over first, as in using it as a user attribute, you're going to have to do it through graph manually. So, but I'm going to make I'm going to burn up the hotlines after we're done, because I'm kind of super curious as to what other options there might be for this. Anyway, so that's a quick lap around the API connector. It's super cool though, because you'll notice we did no XML today. We wrote a little bit of code, we figured out how it worked, and we didn't have to do any XML or custom policies. All the work that we'd already done in the portal was largely already completed, so we didn't have to jump into anything crazy or go and start from scratch with custom policy, which was excellent. So, overall, I'm still super, super bullish on API connectors. So for something that's in preview that just came out, I think it's pretty cool and has a lot of potential usage right now. So, yeah. All right, Mr. Toast, Christos, you still with us, or did I lose you? Because you've gotten frozen. He did this last week. What happened to him? I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back.
You know what?
You're back now.
Wait, you know what? I think I know what the problem is. If you put Skype in the background, and you bring another window in the front, for some reason, it loses the... I don't know what happens. I don't know if it's OBS or if it's Skype. It just goes crazy. Now, obviously, you can't see me because I'm frozen, but you can hear me, right?
Yeah. I can definitely still hear you. So
that is weird. It says, we could not connect to your selected camera. Please choose a different camera. So it seems to be an issue with Skype going in the background.
Yeah.
I don't see why, though.
Anyway, all right. Well, so it's 10 till. There's another show coming up after us, I believe.
Yes.
Believe should be a pretty good one. So stick around if you want. We will be back on Friday. I think Friday. What are we going to try to pick up Asman again? Or are we going to do some more Vue? What are we going to do on Friday?
Well, maybe we can do the BTC component with Vue.
Okay.
And also let's get Azure SDK working. So let's use a different tenant that we have access to, so we can set the permissions just to see it working end to end. And then we can go back to Asman and do some more fun stuff.
I guess we did. I don't want to say its name because it's unmuted right now, so it'll say something. We did the echo on Monday. Or on Friday.
Yeah. Yes.
I kind of want to do Google Home, and we got to get notifications squared away soon. So we still got a few things left. Not to mention, we had a bunch of recommendations for new commands for the Thrasman. So we'll have to get those in. Anyway, thanks a lot for coming. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will be back on Friday, same bat channel and an hour shorter bat time next week. 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. Drop us any notes, questions.
Oh, yeah, it is. I'm getting my time zones mixed up. Damn.
It's too. I get it. It's early. I mean, my brain does not work before 10 a.m. So that's why we had to move the show to 11 for me. But anyway, we'll be back. We'll be back on Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll be around for 2 hours on Friday. Drop us any questions, issues, concerns, comments, personal attacks, whatever you've got. Hit us with them on Twitter. Send them to us in email. We'll make sure and share the email address out. And we all hope you have a great afternoon, great rest of your day, whatever time it might be for you. And we will see everybody on Friday, 8 a.m.
Friday.
See ya.
Take care. Thanks for joining us.